The former Prime Minister, Yulia Tymoshenko, perhaps the country's most powerful politician just now, joined me earlier from Kiev to urgently plead for help in preventing Russia from simply gobbling up the Crimea. This is her first international interview since being freed from jail last week. Yulia Tymoshenko, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining me today in the midst of this very, very severe crisis.
Yes, I'm happy to hear you and very happy to participate in your program.
Let me ask you first, Ms. Tymoshenko, you know, diplomacy is going into overdrive. Secretary Kerry is on his way to Kiev. Your acting Prime Minister, Mr. Yatsenyuk, has said that Ukraine will never get rid of Crimea. It will hang on to Crimea. And the Russians are saying that their troops will stay in Crimea until this crisis is resolved. What is going to be the next move?
The next move of Russians is known today. Literally several minutes ago, the Russian Duma has started listening to the draft of the law of annexion of Crimea from Ukraine. It's only a question of time when it be voted. We all know that votes in Duma will be found. That's why Russia is escalating the crisis now. And the world should understand, should realize that Ukraine on its own won't be able to solve this issue with Russia on its own. Absolutely not possible. And only the world at the highest possible level, using the highest possible means, can stop this unprecedented for our times aggression.
You say that the Russian parliament is now discussing annexing Crimea. What do you expect from the world, which has already said that there is no military solution to help Ukraine?
We all well remember that when Budapest Memorandum was signed and when Ukraine was giving up with its nuclear weapons, then the United States, United Kingdom and Russia was providing guarantees of peace and independence, integrity of its territory. And now, when the crisis is happening, Ukraine is relying on its partners. And if Russia, in such a cynical and rude way, violated this memorandum, then every person in Ukraine believes that the United States and the United Kingdom will stick to their guarantees. And when Russia is allowed to take away Crimea, then the world will change. And then not only politics and life in Ukraine will change, the politics and life will change practically everywhere in the world. And then we have to accept to state that in 21st century, one country, an aggressor, can violate all the international agreements, take away territories, whomever she likes. We can't afford this in the world. That's why if the instruments of diplomacy won't work, if all negotiations instruments won't work and personal relations with Mr. Putin won't work, the world has to apply strongest means. If Ukraine loses Crimea, it will be a signal for all people who are under threat of aggression from Russia. They will signal that they are not protected and they will have to go and subordinate to Russia. I don't believe that the United Kingdom and the United States and also the European Union as a whole will do this to Ukraine. And that's please do your consultations and choose adequate instruments in order to not to allow the tragedy to happen on the territory of Ukraine.
Ms. Tymoshenko, you sound like you're raising the stakes and you are calling for the West to use military force against Russia. Am I reading you correctly? Is that what you're calling for?
As far as the strength using force is concerned, I would like to remind you that in Crimea, the Russian Federation is using force to full extent, and I don't believe it's allowed to act in this following way, even to the superpowers as Russia. I am asking all the world, personally, every world leader to to use all the possibilities in order to avoid Ukraine losing Crimea. And also, I believe some other steps which are necessary to be done. I believe that this is time now to immediately sign an agreement, association agreement between Ukraine and the European Union. Today, all powers in Ukraine, the parliament, the government, practically all people of Ukraine are voting for this association to be signed. And for the Ukrainian people who gave its life for the United Europe, this is the first time in Europe when Ukrainians gave their lives be part of Europe. And when we're told no, that they are not ready to sign this agreement, then Ukraine doesn't really understand this kind of attitude.
Secretary Kerry is coming to Kiev, and he'll meet with you and other leaders there. They are trying to persuade Ukraine to keep its cool. In other words, not to give any pretext to Russia for a full-scale intervention, or even to go beyond Crimea. Is Ukraine thinking of any military response, its own military response to the Russians?
We perfectly aware of the balance of forces of Russia and Ukraine, and I shouldn't comment it. We cannot put people to death at the time when superpowers will be watching it, and me as a person also responsible here. Yesterday I addressed the Ukrainians, the population of Ukraine, to keep calm and not to react to any aggression, because every response to Russian aggression will be used by the aggressor just to destroy Ukraine. There's a critical situation, and as you can understand, it doesn't only concern only Ukraine, but also stability worldwide. That's why this crisis should be solved not on the level of just Ukraine and Russia. It will be irresponsible. The solution should be found at the level of superpowers, the strongest powers in the world.
The Russians are calling for a government of national unity in Ukraine. So also are your Western friends. They want to see you reach out and persuade the ethnic Russians in Crimea and elsewhere that their rights will be respected, and that the new Ukrainian government is a government for all Ukrainians. Can you reach out to those Russians who are being told that your new government does not like them and is anti-them, to make sure that they feel part of the new Ukraine?
Well, first of all, all of us should perfectly realize what kind of ultimatum is voiced by Russia. The ultimatum is that they might stop the aggression if we return a corrupted, blood-stained of Mr. Yanukovych with all his team, return him to power, and then possibly Russia will look into stopping the aggression. For Ukraine, this option of ultimatum is not acceptable. One doesn't need to persuade anyone. All Ukrainian people is uniquely united. Both East, West, they're united. They don't want war, they want stability and peace, and they're against the aggression. Today, people in Crimea, literally every minute, call on to Russia not to let them down and not to start war in Crimea. You should understand that now every Ukrainian, including those living in Crimea, look up to Western countries and expects that Ukraine will be protected according to agreement signed. That's why don't leave Ukrainian people on its own against an aggressive, cynical Kremlin. I just beg you, those who hear me now.
Let me ask you about the order for Ukrainian people to report for military training. We're told that that is what your interim authorities have done, that there is a call up for males to start training for a period of 10 days. If you think that Ukraine cannot face off with Russia militarily, why is this happening? For what purpose?
Відповідь дуже проста.
The answer is very simple. If the United States, the United Kingdom, the European Union will leave us on our own in this difficult situation, and if aggression will come to the extent that the Crimea will be annexed, those men who came to mobilizations those men will just go and die for Ukraine. You should understand that, and they will give their lives. That's why they're being mobilized now, and that's why I ask the world not to allow bloodshed in Ukraine.
Yulia Tymoshenko, thank you for joining me at this very, very difficult moment.
Дякую дуже.
Thank you very much.